Hi everyone, it's Jesse Drever here, Coordinator of Community Development at Leisure Networks. Thank you for joining me for this recording of the Women and Girls Action Planning session as part of our This Girl Can project. This is supported by Vic Health as well as our project partners, the Cardinia Park Stadium Trust, G21 Alliance, City of Greater Geelong, Golden Plains Shire, Surf Coast Shire and the Borough of Queenscliff. This session is a follow-up to the breakfast event and club development forum we held at the end of 2020, which had Guy Malloy, Rochelle Iamy, Maddie Hogan, Bianca Chatfield, Rochelle Olsen, and Jacob Rodder as guest presenters. We have run a number of face-to-face and online sessions with clubs in the G21 LGAs following these events, and present this recording for those who have been unable to attend these sessions. Before we start, I wish to begin by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the land on which I am presenting from today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you are listening in from today, and I wish to pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. In this session, we're going to work through an action planning process to assist and support your club to set goals in the women and girls space and identify any gaps or opportunities to create higher participation within your sport. The project goal is to create more opportunities both on and off the field for women and girls. In terms of the outcomes for the session, we're going to look at the basics of action planning and what you can do as a club for the next 12 to 24 months. We're going to go over a SWOT analysis and how this can help your club to assess where it is currently positioned. We're going to set some focus areas for your club from your self-assessment in terms of ways it can increase women and girls' participation on and off the field, and then look at what is next for your club to make sure you achieve the goals you set. For those clubs in the project, you will have each received a club-specific template of the Women and Girls Action Plan. You should have your copy of this in front of you to work through the activities we'll discuss in this session. There are blank copies of a SWOT analysis and action plan on our Club Help website. The first thing we'll say when we talk about words such as strategic planning, action planning, and SWOT analysis is that they sound like very corporate words. However, as we'll go through and you'll see in this session, these types of activities are so useful for community sports clubs and organisations to assess where you are currently situated and how you can set some clear goals and focus areas to take your club into the future. I'll also note that there is a bit of a distinction between a strategic plan and an action plan. A strategic plan is a more holistic process where the club sets out where it would like to be positioned and what steps will get it to where it wants to be. Comparatively, an action plan more outlines how the club is going to make that strategy a reality by taking the steps and goals and putting some specific actions in place to achieve them. So, in the context of this session, the goal set is to create more opportunities both on and off the field for women and girls. So we'll be designing specific focus areas and actions to achieve this at your club. As we've noted on the slide, the planning documents are important for your club, but so too is the journey for developing it within your club. We'll discuss this shortly. In terms of the benefits of putting in place a plan, firstly, it clearly defines and communicates your priorities as a club to all that you have an interest with it. This is both internally in terms of your members, volunteers and committee, and also externally in terms of the communities in which you are located, your sponsors, your local government authority and other community bodies. It also clearly identifies what your strengths are as a club that support the particular focus area, as well as future challenges and priority areas for development. Going through a self-assessment can also actually uncover new opportunities and approaches that you might not have even considered before going through the process. And importantly, it also acts as the guiding point for decision-making and streamlining of work as it clearly identifies focuses and tasks to be achieved with clear timelines and responsibilities, which has the benefit of removing any ambiguity. When we hear of clubs who have implemented action plans and strategic plans that haven't met expectations, there is often some common themes. So we've put a few of these on the slide, including that plans have been filled with motherhood statements. So effectively, these are when there are some really wordy, fancy looking plans, or they just have really generalist wording. At the end of the day, though, there isn't really any specific measurable actions behind them. Another one is that clubs haven't actually had people in place to see that the actions set are actually carried out. Clubs spend a lot of time actually designing the plan and having all the meetings to agree on focus areas, but then the plan itself just sits on a shelf because there aren't people invested in achieving the goals set. There are also issues when decisions are made in terms of the operations of the club that don't actually take into account the goals and focus areas set as part of the plan, when they really should be. This will result inevitably in the club likely straying from the goals set and the plans get left behind. The last one we've listed on this slide is that clubs haven't been successful in the planning process when they haven't involved or engaged the key people in the club who can actually make it happen. This doesn't just have to be the committee, this can be the key players, volunteers, or even people external to the club such as sponsors. In the end, you will know as a club who are the people that will really have influence, and these are the people that can really help you achieve your goals if you have them on board for the process. On the flip side to the previous slide, successful plans are ones that are reviewed and potentially changed regularly. There isn't anything to say that when you agree on a plan that things don't change in terms of your club's circumstances over time that need to be reflected in an action plan. An example of this was COVID-19, which completely impacted clubs who had some strategy and focus areas for the future prior to the pandemic. Those clubs who have been able to tweak their plans to reflect the current circumstances still with an eye to the future, and at the same time balancing the short-term challenges COVID presented, have put themselves in a great position to bounce forward. Action items should be short and achievable too, so if those responsible for carrying out the actions see that they have a chance to actually get them done by the time frame set, they're more likely to put in efforts to do them. If they see them as a bit pie in the sky and complicated, the plan will likely then just sit on a shelf gathering dust. As mentioned earlier, it is incredibly important that there is a broad grouping of people within the club that are involved in the planning process, that agree on the focus areas, and they're committed to its success. In a perfect world, the whole club are behind it. Successful plans are also well communicated, both internally and externally. Share it with your club members and volunteers so that there is buy-in, but also share it externally with your community, with your sponsors, and with your local government authority. You never know who might see it and be positively impacted to reach out to the club because of the forward-thinking steps being taken. Lastly, it's important that the plans are for the future. Clubs can't get too stuck on what they have done in the past or just what is facing them at present. They have to have plans in place to help guide it into the future so that there is strategy and a framework in place to help in decision making. In terms of some tips to implement the actions set within an action plan, firstly, there is great advantage of having broader involvement in the planning process, as these people are already on board in terms of ensuring the actions get carried out. In terms of your key influences in the club, identify them before commencing the planning work and ensure they're part of discussions. Secondly, make sure you use your plan as a working document with progress updates as an agenda item at all committee meetings. This ensures that the committee is aware of how the club is tracking towards achieving its goals, and potential amendments can be discussed at key time points. As previously mentioned, alter the plan as needed to ensure it reflects the current position and circumstances of the club. Just because there are changes in such circumstances, this doesn't mean that the plan needs to be put on the back burner and left behind. Also look to celebrate the plan widely and regularly. This is both internally and externally. And lastly, set a date to review the plan in its entirety and identify any new potential focus areas to continue to take the club forwards. On this slide, we've recapped some of the key points that were discussed in the breakfast event and club development forum. Firstly, from the breakfast event, it's a known fact that there is a dropout rate of over 60% of females in sport within a 4-year period, and the decline during adolescence is more severe for women and girls. Clubs can say they're inclusive, but this doesn't always mean they are. Does everything they do as a club actually show they're inclusive? For example, is their website truly representative and inclusive club? Are their facilities welcoming and equitable? Another one to note is that girls shouldn't feel like an add-on, but should feel a part of the club community. In terms of the planning of matches and trainings, is this truly inclusive and equitable? Or are the women and girls scheduled to train or play at early or later times on poor grounds and without great coaching resources or support structures in place? It might seem obvious, but males and females are different and can relate or be reached differently. So make sure you as a club take this into account when planning different initiatives and trying to get or keep women and girls involved within your club. Coaches also need to build support on emotional skill as much as physical skills within the sport. So they need to have an ability to relate on this level to ensure women and girls feel their well-being is being placed as a priority and increases the likelihood they'll continue their involvement within the club and sport. Also, men can act as champions of change to really provide encouragement and opportunity for women and girls. It won't be easy, but it's a step at a time and that they can be really key influences in this journey. From the Club Development Forum, Bianca Chatfield noted that one of the key elements of her development through sport as a junior was that her coaches and club encouraged them as players to be involved within the club and sport beyond just the on-court participation. Similarly to as what was discussed in the first session, look to ask the women and girls in the club how they are feeling and try to understand them as people beyond just as players or volunteers. Another great way to make people feel a social connection with the club is to establish a way for people to get involved before they participate. This might be through a personal phone call, inviting them to join a Facebook group, or even just introducing them to people as soon as they arrive at a club, rather than letting them just stand around until the game or training starts. If looking to increase women and girls' participation from a particular age group or demographic that are underrepresented in your club, try and understand the barriers that might be stopping them from being involved in the first place. Is it the time of training or games? Is it the lack of women and girls represented in the club at present? Is it just the general culture? Some of these discussions may be hard ones for you to have as a club, but they will put you in a fantastic position to set these as focus areas for improvement, potentially to open the doors to a whole range of new participants. Okay, so we're now going to move into the activities in the session to prepare your action plan. On this slide is a blank copy of a SWOT analysis. Within the club's workbooks, you'll have both an example of a completed SWOT analysis as well as a blank one for you to complete for your club. Undertaking a SWOT analysis is to do a self-assessment of where your club is currently positioned. This can be just as a broad club review or an assessment of where it is positioned in terms of a particular goal. So SWOT stands for an assessment of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the club. So remember, the project goal we're working through in this session is to create more opportunities both on and off the field for women and girls. So using the template SWOT analysis in the workbook, I want you to ask yourself the following and write down your responses. So firstly, in the top left quadrant, being the strengths supporting the goal, what are the strengths that the club has in this space already? And how could they contribute to the end goal of higher participation and involvement rates of women and girls? Secondly, in the top right quadrant, being development opportunities, what opportunities are happening in the space that could assist with your club's goals to increase women and girls' participation on and off the field? For example, this could include growth of the community, new media representation of sport, or potentially increased funding in the space as well. Thirdly, in the bottom left quadrant, being challenges, weaknesses, what areas could the club further develop in this space? And where is there room for improvement with involving women and girls within your club? Lastly, in the bottom right quadrant, being threats, are there any threats that you see for your club's success of creating more opportunities for women and girls on and off the field? So for example, is the rise in active recreation a threat to getting people involved in the club? Or are there a number of similar clubs or groups in the area that crowd the market a little? Make sure you take the time to complete this fully, as it will give your club a great evaluation of where it is currently positioned, and you'll start to be able to identify some areas to focus on as a club. Once you have completed the SWOT analysis, you're ready to move on to the process of preparing your actions. From the self-assessment you've just completed, you should now look to agree as a club on 2 to 3 areas that you're going to focus on as priorities to create more opportunities both on and off the field for women and girls. A quick tip to this, sometimes clubs can get into the trap of just looking at their challenges or weaknesses and purely trying to address them as focus areas. Whilst there are obviously going to be some weaknesses that will need to be priorities, such as having an inclusive culture within the club to ensure that it is a safe space for all, There is also often great benefit in taking what is a strength of the club and focusing on taking that to another level or ramping up your promotion of it to really become a leader in the area. An example of this might be the breadth of participation opportunities that you offer and how this can be used to get more people involved. Within the workbook, you will see that there are 3 copies of the table you can see on this slide. Next to the words focus areas at the top of each page, write down what each of your focus areas are, so 1 on each table. For example, this could be having a stronger mix on your club's committee or ensuring your online presence demonstrates a welcoming and inclusive club. Once you've written down your focus areas for each of them, you should look to set some quick wins, so being actions you could take in the next 0 to 3 months, medium-term wins, which are 6 to 12 months action items, and then longer-term wins, which are 12 to 24-month action items. Within each of these, have some really clear and simple actions to take to achieve these wins. So if we use the stronger mix on the club's committee as an example, you could do the following in some action items. As a quick win, you could do an audit of the current gender mix on the committee and assess who in your club could be future leaders or where you might need to look outside the club to find them. As a medium-term win, you could look to put in place some skill development opportunities for those future leaders or introduce them to leadership opportunities by putting them on subcommittees to give them a taste of management processes. Then as a long-term win, you could look to appoint some of those future leaders to the committee by going through a bit of a transition process to ensure that you have a good mix of skills, experience, and obviously gender balance on the committee. Once you have set the tasks, you then need to assign someone the responsibility of oversight of that task. This doesn't mean that they're the only ones to do the work, but at the end of the day, they're going to report back on how the club is going towards completing these action items. You'll also list ways council or other bodies can help the club in achieving these goals, as well as an expected timeframe. It is really important to set a timeframe, as leaving it open-ended will increase the likelihood that it just goes down the priority list and doesn't get done. In terms of next steps, so really take your time to complete the process of completing the SWOT analysis and the focus areas, and make sure you do it with a solid representation from the club. So really look to involve the right people in the discussions and take their opinions on board. Once you have completed the SWOT analysis and focus areas, you'll have the action plan that outlines how the club is going to make the goal of creating more opportunities both on and off the field for women and girls a reality by putting some specific action items in place to achieve it. Then, as we've discussed earlier, communicate it, share it, be proud of it. Show that those within the club and in the community that you are committed to being a truly welcoming and inclusive club. The last thing I'll quickly mention is our club help website. This has a wide range of free resources and templates that you can use to help with the action planning process and also with achieving some of the focus areas you've set. Thank you for listening in to this session, and thank you again to our project partners, the Cardinia Park Stadium Trust, G21 Alliance, City of Greater Geelong, Golden Plains Shire, Surf Coast Shire, and the Borough of Queenscliff, as well as This Girl Can and Big Health. We can't wait to see all the clubs in the G21 area as leaders in providing more opportunities for women and girls in sport, on and off the field.